Fluttershy's Giant, Part 8. Princess Celestia's eyes narrowed as she read Twilight's letter. "Monster in the wood, kidnapped Fluttershy," she murmured, and paled. What monsters dare threaten any of my subjects and friends? She got up from her golden throne and paced about the room. What source of devilry is this? She wondered. One of Discord's vile creation? A new stage of evolution from Chrysalis? Sombra's final plan? The princess decided to send some soldiers down to Ponyville and make sure no pony else was getting kidnapped. "Guard," she called. The golden-clad guard bustled in. "Yes, ma'am," he asked and saluted. "Find me Shining Armor. Tell him to assemble the guard forces and head down to Ponyville," the princess said as calmly as possible. "Let's see how this monster fares against equestrian might." The guard nodded. "At once, ma'am." He scurried out and went to find Captain. Celestia sat back on her throne. "I had better send Twilight a letter regarding this monster and her friend," she murmured and levitated a quill towards her. "Thank you for notifying me of this incident. Do not worry, your friends will be brought home safely. You have my sincerest apologies that I have not taken further actions. Soldiers will be arriving shortly after this letter will be sent. Your brother will be among them, your mentor and friend, Princess Celestia." Twilight finished reading the letter aloud to her friend, minus Fluttershy. "Oh, that's simply awful," Rarity murmured. "A monster would kidnap our friend who always sees the good in ponies, or whatever it is." "It's Snow Pony, I can tell you that." Dash snorted and paced in the air, flying backwards and forwards over her friend's head. "It's huge, like 1,000 feet tall." Applejack frowned. "I'm sure it's not that big, Rainbow, but you and Twilight did say it was awfully big. And it's got these two glowing eyes." Dash continued and placed her hooves over her eyes. "Its eyes alone was as big as one of us, maybe even Big Mac." "Poor Fluttershy. I wonder what she's thinking right now," Rarity sobbed, rather over-dramatically. "Oh, woe is our dear friend. I bet that big old meanie took her 'cause he wants to eat her," Pinkie Pie added to the conversation. "I bet he'll make her into cupcakes or something and gobble her up. I wonder what Fluttershy cupcakes would taste like." She trailed off, lost in her own random little world. Twilight shook her head. "I don't think he wants to eat her, Pinkie. I think he just took her to..." She scratched her head. "I don't know what he wants with her, but at least some soldiers are coming. And Shining Armor. That's something." She smiled bravely and stifled a sob for her friend. Rainbow Dash slumped down and let her wings droop. "Poor Flutters. I hope she's alright." Applejack nudged her. "She'll be fine. Say, where's Apple Bloom and her friends?" "Whee!" Fluttershy cried as Dog held her up in the sky. The giant smiled as he bounded through the meadows. They had cleared the forest a while ago and were currently venturing through unknown territory and loving the time they spent together. "I never thought I'd be so high up again," Fluttershy said and gazed down at the distant ground, over the edge of his finger. "Scared?" "Yes, but I feel safe with your hand underneath me," she told him and kissed the tip of his finger. "Ooh, let's go over there," she cried and pointed to a large hill. Dog nodded and turned in that direction. His giant legs carried them far in such a short time. The Pegasus in his palm glanced behind her and tried to peer around his steely body at the forest far behind. "We're so far away from home," she murmured. "Home." Dog stopped and stared up the sky. Fluttershy yelped at the sudden stop. "Dog?" He looked down and blinked at her, indicating he was listening. Do you miss your home? Yes. Where do you come from? He raised a giant arm and pointed to the sky. She followed his gaze and his arms up to the heavens. Is it nice? The giant frowned. Can you remember? He shook his head sadly and pointed to the dent in his head. Then he looked back down at her. A few moments of silence passed as she squeezed his finger, and he curled said finger into his palm and stroked her mane. You could live with me, she murmured. Her cheeks suddenly turned bright pink as she fought to hide herself from his gaze. I mean, if you want to, I'm just saying, it would be nice. You're such a good friend. She stammered and slowly turned as red as the apples of Applejack's flank. Dog smiled and pushed some of her mane out of her eyes. Fluttershy, friend. Dog stay with friend. She beamed up at him and kissed his finger again. Her eyes wandered down to a cheer and a couple of chattering voices. Fluttershy, the voice called out. Girls? She squeaked and squinted down at them. Sure enough, the Cuba Crusaders had followed them through the forest and were charging towards them through the meadows. Didn't Twilight and Rainbow Dash take you free home? Apple Bloom nodded. Yeah, but we can't escape to come play with y'all again. Howdy, dog, she said and beamed up at the giant. He smiled back and lowered himself down, spreading his hand on the ground and helping the fillies onto his palm. Scootaloo held on for dear life as they were raised up. Wow, dog, you sure can make us go high, she murmured as she gazed down at the ground below and shot a hateful glare at her own wings. Sweetie nudged Apple Bloom. I think some ponies chicken, she giggled. Scootaloo scowled. I'm not. M2. I'm not. M2. Girls, Fluttershy said sternly and silenced them immediately. Her face softened up as she hugged them though. I'm glad to see you, but we're glad to see you, Shy. Sweetie beamed. But, Fluttershy repeated before they could interrupt again. You really should have stayed home. What if some pony followed you? What would they think of Dog? That mare in the fire thought he was a monster, she murmured, and gazed up at him. I don't want ponies thinking he's bad. He's not. Dog turned his head away. Monster. No, Apple Bloom cried. You're not a monster. You're just, giant, she said hopefully. He looked down at her. She's right, Dog. Fluttershy told him and nuzzled his finger again. You want to hear something my mother told me? Dog nodded. You are what you choose to be. The girls looked at the Pegasus with a strange affinity for her. I'm scared of a lot of things, but I choose to be brave. I chose to be brave and come see you the first time we met. Do you remember how scared I was? The giant nodded again. Fluttershy continued. And the girls, they chose to be brave. The Crusaders nodded as one. We did. And you can choose to be whoever you want, Fluttershy told the giant. You could be a hero and save ponies like you did with that mare and stallion in the fire. Superhero. Yes, a superhero like Daring Do or Rainbow Dash or Twilight or any pony else. He beamed down at her and curled his finger to stroke her mane again. She nuzzled him and kissed his giant finger once more. The Crusaders awed quietly as they watched them. Fluttershy blushed and rested her cheek against his metallic finger. So, what do you want to do now, girls? You really should go back home now, though. Apple Bloom shook her head. They'll just make us set a home with our hooves up our... Apple Bloom! Fluttershy cried, shocked at the almost profanity in such a young filly. The Earth Pony filly turned scarlet and her bow drooped. I meant head in our hooves. The Pegasus scowled at her with cheeks of the rose pink variety. That's because they don't want anything to happen to you. I know, Apple Bloom muttered, But we're big ponies. We can take care of ourselves. Fluttershy spread her wings and hugged the three fillies. Scootaloo looked up at Dog as she released them. So, can we go play? She asked hopefully. The foal-sitter looked up at Dog and smiled. I suppose, but be careful. Dog smiled as he lowered his hand and the three fillies scampered off. Fluttershy glided off with grace. The giant smiled as he strode after the fillies as they charged towards the lake, the small cluster of trees. He's so friendly. I hope my friends could see him now and see he's not a monster, she thought and trotted after them. Careful, girls, Fluttershy called out as they climbed on a large rock jutting out above the lake. They waved their hooves and clambered up. The Pegasus sighed and nestled down on the grass, gazing up the giant as he hunkered down next to her. Aren't you going to play, Dot? Fluttershy asked him. He stared ahead with a blank expression. Probably just thinking, she thought, and let the subject die for now. Hey Fluttershy, look at this! Scootaloo cried. I'm watching, she called back with a large smile. Stand back, guys, this is for professionals only. The orange filly told her friends and grinned mischievously. She took a running jump and Banzai! Leapt off the edge of the rock, diving into the lake head first. The purple mane plastered to her skin as she resurfaced. Come on, guys, the water's fine, she said through chattering teeth. Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle jumped in after her and splashed in the water. Celestia! The water's freezing, Sweetie Belle cried. Fluttershy snorted in laughter and covered her face up, deeply embarrassed. The girls splashed each other while the foal-sitter and the giant watched. Aren't you gonna come in, Shy? Apple Bloom asked. Fluttershy shook her head. No, I'm fine, she said, and laid her head down and closed her eyes. Right. How about you, Dog? Dog looked down at her and blinked. Then he got up, without a word, and walked away. What the? Did I say something wrong? The bird pony murmured to her friends as she tread water. Fluttershy started when she heard the heavy footfalls of the giant walk away from them. Dog? The sudden pounding started up. What? Ah! Fluttershy squealed as the dog charged overhead. Banzai! He leapt in the air, making the fillies in the water flail out of the way. Ah, swim! Scootaloo cried as the dog began to fall. The water roared out of the lake, making a tidal wave rise up before Fluttershy. The buttered Pegasus froze in fear as she watched the water descend. Woo! Scootaloo cried, like she had been licking too much salt. That was awesome! She held onto the treetop for dear life and laughed like a mad pony with her friends. Fluttershy twitched and shook the seaweed off her and out of her mane. Hey Fluttershy! Apple Bloom called down. Yeah? The filly took to laughing her head off as the foal-sitter began to rinse her hair out, grumbling away to herself. Dog sat in the middle of the lake and glanced around. Most of the water had been lifted out and splashed around the trees in the countryside. The yellow Pegasus glared at him and let the smile spread across her face. She fell back, kicking and waving her legs in the air in laughter. The filly slid down the tree and dropped to the ground, then rushed over to their foal-sitter and huddled around her. Dog smiled and wiggled Fluttershy around in his finger. She cried. Stop it! She wailed and tried to fight him off. The fillies joined in and began tickling her too. Meanwhile, Shining Armor, his sister, and her friends watched the fillies scamper away from the trees and defend the Pegasus flailing on the ground. She must be hurt, Rarity whispered. Rainbow Dash snorted and spread her wings. And they've got the Crusaders, she growled and fluttered into the air. Just say the word, and I'll go get them. You can't get them all. Besides, I want to get my own sister. Rare wants to do the same for Sweetie. Applejack growled. Rarity nodded. Yes, such an uncouth giant causing a ruckus in such a beautiful place. Why that big fat mini giant? Pinky muttered and let her mane droop. No pony hurts my friends. Twilight nodded and turned to her brother. Shiny, can we rescue them now? Shining Armor nodded and raised a hoof. Get ready, he whispered to his company of soldiers. We're going to rescue the fillies and Pegasus. Do not attack the monster until they are clear. Understand? Sir, yes, sir. The soldiers responded and flexed their muscles, spread their wings and warmed up their horns. Twilight, you and your friends get the girls clear, then we'll move in, the captain told his sister. Twilight nodded and turned to her friends. Come on, girls. They bounded out of the forest and charged towards the giant. AJ! Apple Bloom cried and jumped towards her sister. I'm so glad you're here. Y'all can meet. Get behind me, Apple Bloom. Applejack warned her sister and hoisted her onto her back. And not a single word till you get home. You hear? Sweetie, here, now. Rarity commanded her own sister. Dash swooped downwards and scooped up Scootaloo. Hold on, Squirt. The fillies glanced around in confusion. Twilight and Pinkie Pie grabbed Fluttershy and helped her up. Come on, Fluttershy. It's alright. We're here now. That monster's not gonna hurt you anymore. Pinkie cried. Fluttershy glanced down with wide eyes. What? No, you don't understand. What monster? She whispered and stared up at Dog, who looked down with worried eyes and hurt expression. Now, Shining! Twilight yelled. Shining Armor and his soldiers leapt forward. Fire! He shouted. The unicorn archers charged their horns and fired a series of multicolored beams at the giant. Dog reared back in surprise as the beam harmlessly hit him, merely darkening his steel body. Wait! Fluttershy murmured as her friends carried her back towards the trees. The fillies struggled away from their sisters, and Rainbow Dash tried to run towards Dog. Get back here! Twilight, help me! Twilight cast her magic around them and levitated them back to their sisters. Stay put, she said to them. The fillies watched in despair as the attack began on their friend. Fire! Shining yelled again. Another volley of beams. The giant's eyes widened in surprise and he stretched an arm out to stop them. The Earth Pony guards rose their legs and tried to buck him away. Pegasi! The skies darkened as several squadrons of Pegasi guards descended, circling around the giant's head and cracking thunderclouds as they went. Dog frowned and tried to swipe them away, knocking a few of their flanks and making them crash into the ground. Fall back! The captain roared and fired a magenta ball of energy at the monster. It hit the target square, knocking the giant on its back and sending him sprawling into the lake. Wait! Fluttershy cried as she struggled free of Pinkie and charged through the soldiers. Dog looked up with scared eyes into those of her friend. Fluttershy. He reached a hand out and scooped her up. Run! She yelled as he covered her up. Stop! Twilight bellowed to the troops. It's got Fluttershy! Dog stood up to its full height and charged off towards Ponyville, leaving the confusion and horrible misunderstanding behind him. Fluttershy still crouched in his hand.